the purpose, the task of the blood network is fantastic. It's definitely a discussion that needs to have, especially around the UK diagnostics, that it's going into tremendous transition, especially for post-pandemic, learning from the lessons from our response to the pandemic. So what I thought I would do is basically I'll give like the next half an hour, like a broad overview of the state of the UK the diagnostics and some of the key challenges that we have, that they were present even before the COVID, but how COVID actually shaped and changed our minds and our thinking around diagnostics. And so what are the grand challenges now post-COVID, and finally how we all put this together into the landscape report that Neil Anderson, my colleague Neil Anderson and I, we're putting together. So I'm sure you all know, I mean, you heard already the very succinct summary from Vicky, is that diagnostics play an important role throughout the different facets of the healthcare system. They're extremely important for disease diagnosis, for treatment, for selection of treatment, monitoring the efficiency of treatment, for prognosis of patients, and so on. The proper use of diagnostics, they have a major impact on health outcomes, but also on economic outcomes. Because appropriate treatments will improve the health outcomes, when inversely this is reduced by inappropriate treatments, but in response they will have a negative impact on the health economics. So all this, and you see some examples, and this is a very nice slide from the Lancet Commission report. It gives a very some of the key points where diagnostics play an important role and identify the need to have proper and appropriate diagnostics services and systems available to support the healthcare systems. But also one, of course, now the most important is the last one, is the population level surveillance. And this is something that became so obvious during the past 2 years of our response to the COVID pandemic, because the ability to detect and monitor the infection is something a virus such as COVID-19 played a key role in the way that the society has responded to the pandemic. So, and of course, this has an impact both on the safety of the population, at the population level, both the safety of the population, but also on the economy of the various nations. So, let me see why I'm moving forward. So, in the UK is in the UK healthcare, it is in an envious position, because actually, as one of the main global economies, it is the healthcare system is seen as a model for many other countries, and there are two major pillars that underpin and support the UK healthcare and delivery. The first one is the UK is a global leader in clinical discovery and scientific excellence. So effectively, we have a lot of academic excellence that feed into the healthcare system. And also, there's the national healthcare system, the NHS, has established is a work that has an excellent reputation for the safety and efficiency, and also for the workforce. And within this framework, this healthcare framework, of course, pathology again plays a key role in all the key elements of the various care pathways in screening, in diagnostics, and monitoring. And these are some examples of the care pathways that where pathology and diagnostics play a key role. So, some of the key facts, and I know that Vicky mentioned already some of them, but some of the facts that identify the magnitude of the diagnostics healthcare in the UK. So there are about 105 hospitals where they have a workforce about 28,000 biomedical, clinical biomedical scientists and pathologists that deliver about 1.2 billion tests per annum. There are about 95% of all the clinical pathways that rely on patients having access to pathology services. There are, every year, there are about 500 million biochemistry and 130 million hematology tests that they carried out per year. This is based on some basis of this suggest that each person in England and Wales, they have 14 tests that perform annually. And also, every working day, there are about 300,000 tests in the various diagnostic labs. So, and there are about 50 million reports. They are communicated from labs to the primary care practices every year. That gives you some examples. It captures of the scale of the business, of the diagnostic business in the UK. So for many years, for the past 20 years, there were two main drivers of the UK pathology, especially pre-COVID. And this was, in some way, they were the quality of care, they were generated, they produced, and also efficiencies, in particular the cost efficiencies. There were some major and very influential reports that they were produced by NHS improvement and also the Carter Review, the Pathology Modernization Program, that they recognized the need to change. And there is a change of scale for the pathology services. And focusing, initially the focus was on the service transformation, was on efficiencies within the test production process. And this, of course, would result in savings for the organizations and the healthcare system in general. And all this work led to the 2017, the proposal and the commitment to consolidate the pathology services into a number of pathology networks with aim of reducing variation and costs. In parallel, there was a recognition that we should not only focus on those two elements. The quality, of course, the quality of care was paramount important, but also it's not just focus on cost savings, but we need to start thinking how we're going to use the savings, how we're going to use this service reconfiguration to improve the offering, the product. And it was a recognition that we need to start thinking, we need to start applying innovative ways of using the pathology services. And of course, by doing so, by bringing innovation, by start thinking differently, you start improving the services in order to enhance the care pathways, in order to enable, for example, the patients to take control of the chronic conditions and so on. And also to start use the pathology to lead changes that will save, that will improve services in and outside the laboratory. And Neil and I will contribute to the discussion by publishing our report on the bulletin of the College of Pathologists, describing exactly the need to bring innovation into the services. So one of the major issues that diagnostics and pathology face in the UK and globally is that historically, diagnostics was not the main priority of the healthcare funding. And it was always, for a number of years, it was always seen that it was secondary to treatment, to development of new treatments, to vaccines, and cure. So the fact that it was undiagnosed, this is a staggering figure, and I'm pretty sure that whoever produced this figure has tested is based on actual data. Is for every £100 spent in the NHS, there's only one pound that's invested in diagnostic testing. You can see the difference in the magnitude of the funding and the effort and focus. And of course, there was always the drive to achieve more for less. So probably the last sentence is something that captured the thinking, especially pre-COVID. But at the same time, there is clearly now, even before COVID, there's an understanding there's a need to reform the diagnostics landscape. is because primarily a lot of the new developments in medicine, in biomedical research, in clinical medicine and healthcare was based on having appropriate diagnostics to support it. In particular, we are, UK as a nation, it is, has a number of health priorities of the populations increasingly becoming aging, and there's an increased prevalence of chronic conditions as well as mental health issues, especially post-COVID. So things like diabetes complications, obesity, cardiovascular disease are main targets, priority healthcare targets that require urgent support, and diagnostics are key in delivering, improving the services. There is a commitment by the NHS and by the government, by the state, to bring personalized and precision medicine into the healthcare in the UK, and also globally. Everyone recognizes that this is the way forward. Again, precision diagnostics, precision medicine requires appropriate diagnostics to support it in delivery. And of course, all this, it is very well presented and the case put forward in the long-term NHS plan. Let's put forward. This is an example of the top 20 conditions and the constitute the global burden of disease. And you can see that by 2030 to 2040, you can see conditions where diagnostics are going to play a major role into delivery. Into cardiovascular disease, ischemic heart disease will remain the top condition that's responsible for most of the years life lost, and followed by, of course, things that complications like kidney disease, like stroke, which of course are complications of diabetes and other chronic conditions as well, with the increased prevalence of conditions such as Alzheimer's and dementia, especially post-COVID. So clearly, you can see one by one, you can identify that diagnostics will play a major role into this, in how we deal, how we screen, how we diagnose, and how we treat these conditions. And of course, all this discussion was happening until March 2020, and of course then something major, something of cataclysmic proportions happened, and that was COVID. He turned up, clearly not uninvited, but nevertheless, it turned up. And as you can see, we all know by now what the impact that play in our society, not just in the healthcare system, but in all of us in the society in general, with the lockdowns. Now, clearly, the two things, the two elements, on one hand, now, because of the role the diagnostics played into how we dealt with COVID, now COVID is right at the center of all the discussion, all the strategy around the development of diagnostics, how we deal with future pandemics, and so on. But now this is the time to have the discussion and learn from the lessons, from COVID lessons, so we'll be able to devise the right strategy for the future diagnostics. Overall, I think that diagnostics, especially in the UK, because the way that was organized, they were able to tell, more than satisfactory with the COVID, with identifying how we dealt with the patients coming to the hospital. At the same time, let's not forget, let's not ignore the fact that the pandemic posed some major operational organizational challenges to the NHS diagnostics labs, and identify, for example, that there is generally a fragmented. The fabric of the UK diagnostics is not as seamlessly joined as it should. So identify various gaps that needs to be taken into account in order into the future developments. Another issue that we had was the supply chain. What we found was quite vulnerable to, because most of it was coming from abroad. And we were, for example, in Coventry, in our lab, we found ourselves competing with reagents that were coming from a country in Europe, and we're competing with another country in Asia. How we get access to this. Also, there was not an optimal interaction that what we found between the industry and academia to allow to stepping up of the whole effort in order to address some of the issues. And even within the NHS labs, there were still elements and examples of inflexible practice and difficulties in adapting to the new priorities. And in particular, the last one, that's something for us is key, is what we identify is that there's gaps in the skill mix of the workforce, able to deal with to meet the challenge of COVID and any pandemic. In parallel, I mean, Lancet, they've developed the Lancet Commission, and they produced a report on diagnostics, producing some of the lessons and describing some of the lessons in the exam from COVID pandemic and presenting it. And this is they're mostly dealing with the global field of diagnostics, because a lot of the people are based, they are from pathology and laboratory medicine background, but also from another disciplines, such as end users, policy commissioners, and also patient advocates and so on. So they clearly described during this excellent report that we produced in last year that the diagnostic capacity of the country is directly linked to its ability to respond to pandemics. And even when appropriate measures are in place and surveillance programs, the absence of proper diagnostics will have a major negative effect on the country responses. They make a very strong case. There's a need to strengthen diagnostics for the future pandemic preparedness, but also beyond pandemics in general, to deal with most of the conditions that are the major problem in the world in global health. So this will require and potentially differences and changes in the way that the diagnostic systems are organized across the different countries, and take into account some of the unique differences and distinct differences of various countries, either developing or developed countries. And of course, they put some recommendations to how we potentially can accelerate, transform access to diagnostics. So the 10 key points that they identified that require focusing is that better access to diagnostics, and that is what we should always remember is that almost 50% of the global population have no access to diagnostics. Okay. So that's something worth remembering. I know that we're mostly interested and we're more focusing on individual countries, in the UK in particular, but globally, almost 50% of the population do not have access to diagnostics. There is a strong case to improve the infrastructure. There is need for better organization of the various services, and they made the distinction between basic versus specialist diagnostics, and needs to be evidence-based integration of this, so it works seamlessly. Something that's been identified, and we'll talk again and again, and clearly from Vicky's presentation and focus of the program, digitalization is a key lever, a key way in order to deliver, to improve diagnostics. Workforce, again, features very heavily on the way to upskill and increase the size of the workforce. To develop methods and ways to facilitate innovation and adoption to innovation, either coming from the industry or from academia and other units. Clearly, there's need for more funding. There's a national strategy, and also what they also make the case of the lack of champions to push the advocacy and the national strategy. And of course, it's better, they made the case that this should work in unison globally and develop international alliances to achieve that. One example of the potential impact, but when you bring those changes, is there are 6 priority conditions that they focus: diabetes, hypertension, HIV, and tuberculosis, and the hepatitis B and syphilis for pregnant women. By improving the detection, diagnosis, and treatment of these conditions, or the diagnostic gaps for this, we have a major and a huge economic impact on some of the most the less privileged population. And some of the benefit cost that they reported, the magnitude is quite substantial. It is, I'm not a health economist, but talking with health economists, this is something that that definitely requires further attention to achieve it. Now, of course, a lot of the lessons around the Lancet Commission report, you can translate into, you can bring into the relevant to the UK setting. And this is something that our colleagues Lawrence Young from Warwick and Neil Anderson and I, we put together a response to this, where we describe actually how the lessons that we can learn from the COVID pandemic in order to improve and think the next strategy of diagnostics in the UK. So the main one, I think that everyone agrees, needs to be a change into the mindset and the essential focus of this in the UK. So we move away from the drive to achieve more with less and think differently. One of the lessons that the UK diagnostics and our experience is that the successful units, they were able to deal better with serve better the local and the different regions, is those that they had to learn quickly and adapt and develop novel ways to meet some of the clinical care, the unmet needs. And this was very important, to learn quickly, act and adapt to, because we were dealing with something unknown, something that potentially was changing very quickly in the information on a daily basis. Pathology and laboratory medicine are able to make very good and clinical and scientific contributions. This is something that was widely recognized and during the COVID pandemic. Again, workforce and the need to have the workforce with the right skills, because clearly the labs that were able to meet the demands of COVID were the labs that they were able to mobilize staff that they were able to PCR, if we want to talk about it, just into the molecular methods. And not all labs have this the capacity to bring staff to do that. So there's a critical need to upskill staff in order to be able to meet any future pandemics or other public health threats. Again, the ability to translate quickly. It's coming back to what the report says. You need to have pathways that you're able to translate, to accelerate translation quickly into clinical practice, and that is for new methods or for new concepts of biomarkers, for example, that most of the diagnostics is about, and that is that to have a system in place where we're able to capture, identify the promising ones, and quickly bring them into the clinical practice. And to do that, I think that everyone agrees that the concept of triple helix, which is the joining between NHS, academia, and and industry is the best model to achieve that. Okay, and all this is required, especially if we start thinking outside COVID, outside the COVID section, and we start thinking how we develop diagnostic services in order to deliver the promise of precision medicine and also the integrated care pathways. So in addition to our thoughts that we presented, the number of other reports have been generated since then. They all agree, all the different authors and groups and professional bodies, they all agreed on the same thing. You can split the what's required, the key areas of pathology that requires support and development into focusing on the workforce, how you do it, of how in the infrastructure, how you optimize the use of the infrastructure, and how you develop pathways in order to achieve rapid uptake and translation of various innovations. So moving forward, there are a number of challenges. There are a number of directions that the healthcare globally and in the UK are moving towards. Genomic medicine is something that is developing. It's already embedded into the healthcare system. The chances are that there will be more focus on genomic medicine, on the information we get from nucleic acids, but also at the same time, we need to start thinking about how we can start using the phenotype, which is the patient coming through the clinic, and the genotype into how we get this information and we use it for the best outcome to identify the right treatment and the best advice for the patient. The era of digitalization, AI-driven solutions, they would play a major role into the healthcare system, only not just to improve the outcomes, but also to reshape the healthcare system, the way it delivers care. So there are a number of initiatives into the diagnostics world, and Neil Anderson, he leads some of them, especially the integrated care pathway, and he's heavily involved at the central policy level with GERFT, with community diagnostics, with accelerated access collaboratives. They are established especially to accelerate the introduction of treatments and diagnostics. And of course, generally, how we achieve better seamless integration of services in order to optimize the outcomes. And of course, for all this, you need to have the appropriate good use of appropriate regulation and appropriate groups where they will assess the various products, the proposals, and they will be able to identify what are the key barriers and what are the key points by which we need to use in order to accelerate, to identify the right tools and push them quickly through towards the patient. Specifically about the digitalization, this is, I think, it's a good example that captures most of the drive of where the digital use of is heading towards the healthcare. On one hand, you see the bottom right, it's more about AI to allow development of clinical decision support tools, to how you interpret the results and guidance, and also how you use machine learning to identify innovative ways for the use of this test. But at the same time, the NHS in particular is very rich on patients' data that can be used and can be analyzed in order to optimize services. And that's something that already we started working on, how we better use the existing patient data that they are stored over many years. And of course, in addition, you have all this, the novel ways by which you push innovation, information and communication in order to achieve that, in order to optimize the experience of the patient, how the clinicians talk to each other, and how the clinicians talk to the patient as well. So I'm going to go very quickly. One of the key messages is that how we can enable, how we're going to be able to capture and accelerate the innovation in the NHS in diagnostics. And in Coventry, for a few years now, we set up our Institute of Precision Diagnostics, which primarily the main focus was to capture, to identify the right tools, potentially test the right tools, to be able to quickly translate, because we both Neil Anderson and I, we recognize that although there's a lot of academic activity happening in the space of diagnostics, there was very little translation into the routine practice. And for example, both of us, and Neil has slightly more experience than in NHS, but for the past 30 years, we've seen very little change in the number of tests, the number of ways that we use routinely. Although there is a lot of investment, heavy investment in the development of new biomarkers, development of new pathways. So these are the kind of vehicles that you need in order to capture, test, and identify the right ones and push them through. And things like the proof of concept studies, how we better interact with our local population and is important, and also how you better link industry, academia, and the NHS, okay, and how you capture the innovation. And I think that the future blood testing is a good example of how we can achieve that, and how we can actually bring a very promising, very interesting project and an idea how we can test it and bring it into the NHS quickly. And of course, it was the institute that allowed us to do a number of things. And of course, we won a number of awards about this, about our COVID response, in the way that we dealt with diagnostic labs, and also developing new biomarkers and develop research tools that we can use for future studies. So the last part, the last couple of minutes, I'm going to talk about the future blood testing, the landscape report that Neil and I are putting together, which effectively captures everything that was said into the report. What we're hoping to achieve with this report is to describe the current state of the art of the diagnostic services in the UK. And in the UK, although the UK can learn from other countries and vice versa and other systems, the use of the NHS or the UK diagnostics, which is primarily NHS based, makes it quite unique, and that makes it quite offer certain advantages and distinct advantages over the other countries. Okay, so some of the things that I spoke already about, the modernization agenda, the Carter review, and also all these key drivers we described that shape some of the existing thinking around achieve more for less. Okay, so in parallel, there are, so some of the emerging clinical needs into that they will have a major impact in diagnostics, and some of the thinking around how the whole healthcare system is changing, is developing, especially some of the clinical pathways that need to change. For example, the accelerated access collaborative and the role of the academic healthcare networks and other units and vehicles that are set up by the NHS exactly to facilitate innovation and to bring innovation into the NHS. One area which I think that we need to focus, especially looking ahead, just fulfilling the future diagnostics, we focus on what will be the main drivers, the main issues of the future healthcare. So multimorbidities is a major one, and especially for areas such as West Midlands, we know which is #1 in diabetes complications, It's in one of the worst areas in Europe. Almost 70% of all diabetics, they have at least one another condition, either cardiovascular disease, hypertension, or heart disease, or stroke, and so on. So this is a result because of the multimorbidities, the inability of the current setup to deal with multimorbidities, because they tend to work in silos for the services, and this has been identified as a major area of investment. So again, the multimorbidities, chronic conditions, it's something that needs proper diagnostics to support it, and that's where AI, for example, can play a major role. Okay, and of course, some of the ambitious aims of the healthcare system to bring precision medicine, bring genomics into the much more obvious into near patient is important. So I think I talked about this, and so just the last couple of slides is about our approach. Is want to paint the big picture, and also a key focus will be to engage with a number of key opinion leaders about not just about the clinical aspect, but also about the whole landscape of diagnostics, especially the compliance and regulation, the data analytics, the patient involvement, the logistics as well, but also some of the trainers, of the educators that will be involved with the training, which will deliver everything that we discussed. Okay, so this is just a list. It's not exhaustive, just something that we mentioned, but of course there's scope to bring more into the discussion about those who our connections would be able to interview and discuss the views about the current and future diagnostics in the UK. So on that, I will stop. Thank you very much for listening, and happy to answer any questions.